Good morning, and thank you for inviting me to speak to you today. I want to tell you about Bredhurst Woodland Action Group, or BWAG, and how our group started and the impact it's had on the local environment and our community. Firstly, where is Bredhurst? As you can see, we're in North Kent, about 6 miles north of Maidstone, which is the county town of Kent. This is our woodland. It's 600 acres of ancient woodland surrounded by chalk grassland, which takes a total area up to about 1,000 acres. The woodland is mainly chestnut coppice with some hornbeam and yew, and the village of Bredhurst, I don't know if you can see just to the north there, is tiny in comparison. It's only 170 houses compared to the 1,000 acres that is on our doorstep. Why BWAG began? BWAG began, as Douglas has said, because our woodland was being destroyed by fly tipping and the illegal use of off-road vehicles. So 6 of us got together, we decided that we'd had enough, and one evening we sort of put our heads together just to see what options we thought we had. The first thing we did, we went to the parish council. I was actually, well I still am, the vice chairman of the parish council, and we thought by joining forces with the residents and the parish council we'd have more clout, as it were, when we went to other organisations to get help. And this worked well because it gave us more credibility when we approached organisations. They obviously knew of the parish council, but they hadn't heard of BWAG. As Douglas said, this was our woodland in 2005. Maidstone Borough Council actually classed it as a commercial fly tipping site. Everywhere you looked, you just couldn't, well, you couldn't see any vegetation at all. It was just fly tipping everywhere. Another problem that we had was the illegal use of off-road vehicles. Every path and bridleway was destroyed. Most were impassable by foot. When public rights of way, when these routes, the bridleways and the footpaths weren't exciting enough, don't quite know what's happening here, sorry. When they weren't exciting enough, the vehicle owners were then cutting down trees, 100-year-old yews, 200-year-old yews, and making their own paths through the woodland to make it a bit more challenging for themselves. So this is actually a footpath that had just disintegrated. BWAG organised its first fly tipping clearance day in 2006. We had about 60 volunteers, tractors, trailers, and we cleared 100 tonnes of rubbish in one day, including, I mean, there was a mountain of tyres, there was an Abbey National ATM, quite how that got into the woods, we don't know. And we deposited everything in the church car park, and Maidstone Borough Council came along the next day and disposed of it. They did turn up the following morning and they queried why we hadn't put it into the piles. They wanted rubber and glass, but we glossed over that and they did take it away. We've formed strong links very early with Kent Wildlife Trust and the Kent Downs AONB unit. I don't know what's happening here. Honestly, I'm not touching anything, but it's... There we are. Oh, okay, that's what I'm doing. Right, okay. We formed strong links with Kent Wildlife Trust and the Kent Downs AONB unit. We're in the area of outstanding natural beauty, and the Mid-Kent Downs project has been very, very supportive. As I say, when the 6 of us got together, none of us have come from a farming background or an environmental background. We were just 6 residents that were sick of the way the woodland was being abused. We approached Kent County Council to see if they could help. The public rights of way officers were very supportive, but they didn't really have the authority to make a real difference. We're very fortunate in Bredhurst that our ward member for KCC is Paul Carter, who's the leader of Kent County Council. I knew Paul through my work with the parish council. Once we'd got him on board, we took him out to the woodland, we showed him exactly the state of everything. He then made sure that a lot of his senior officers came out, and once we'd got that level of interest, things really started to move. The Kent Downs AONB unit helped to secure funding. Obviously there's arable fields either side of the byway here, and the Offroad Vehicles just thought that was an additional challenge. They didn't see that as somebody's livelihood, and it was there for crops, not for their pleasure. The head of Public Rights of Way was extremely supportive. There's a byway that cuts through the centre of the woodland, and this gave easy access to the fly tippers and the off-road vehicles. KCC set about introducing a traffic regulation order on the byway, and they gated either end of the track and put digital padlocks on there, and the only people now that are allowed to go in are landowners and people who have applied for permits. So we haven't excluded all off-road people, because we didn't think that, you know, it's obviously a woodland for everyone, but they're allowed to stay on the byway, but not on bridleways, footpaths, or to make other tracks for themselves. So obviously by issuing permits, they've got to provide insurance details, and we know that they're legitimate off-road green lane people that will only stick to the byway, and we're happy with that. The police were very supportive. They patrolled the area frequently, and it has worked quite well. The paths, which were all destroyed, the local army barracks, I went there, well, I phoned them, and to see if they could offer support. And in the end, they were in our woods for about 4 months. They provided all the manpower and machinery, about £2,000 worth of materials, and we raised £60,000. We went to Paul Carter, our county member. He pointed us in the direction of other funds, and we raised the funds for all the aggregate. I made contact with a local supplier, who again gave it a vastly reduced cost. But it was quite something. You know, as I say, we're 170 houses, and to see all these huge green army vehicles trundling into our village one day, I think some residents must have thought we'd gone balmy. So this is one of the part of the byway that they restored. This is a week's difference. So the week before it was gloomy and potholey and horrible, and then the week later they'd restored it. The paths that were actually restored, a lot of residents were uneasy about having lovely new surfaces. They thought that the off-road vehicles would think that this was, you know, really would benefit them. And the Public Rights of Way people kept assuring me that as soon as you get legitimate use of the woodland by walkers, horse riders and everything, all the antisocial stuff would stop. It took us a bit of persuading of me and others, but they were right, that once you get legitimate users into the wood, they're now our eyes and ears, and the slightest misdemeanour in the woodland now, my phone number and other board members' phone numbers are located throughout the woodland, and we know the minute that there's a bike where it shouldn't be, or if there's any fly tipping. An added problem that we've got in the woods is the area that we manage. In the late 60s, it was split off, sold up and sold into individual plots. There's 139 plots owned by 104 owners. So before we could even go on the land to get rid of the fly tipping or do any improvements, we had to trace the owners. We, in our naivety, thought that we'd go along to Land Registry, they'd give us a nice list, we write to everybody, try and get everybody on board, and that would be the end of it. Obviously, when we went to Land Registry, they didn't have a complete list of all the owners. Some had died, some had moved, they hadn't notified Land Registry. So it sort of, a couple of our board members actually had to turn into detectives to try and locate these people. Of the 104 owners, we've now traced about 80, and about 75 have given us permission to work on their land. And the ones that haven't, there's some outline areas, plot 89, plot 130, that's being farmed by local farmers. So it's not that they don't want us on their land, they don't need us, that they can manage their own little bits. Fundraising and our social events. Douglas was talking about bringing the community together. I mean, obviously, initially it was to get rid of the rubbish, but then things sort of, progressed, and we quickly realised that what we wanted to do in the woodland, the path restoration and fencing and other stuff that needed to be done, we needed lots of money. So we now hold lots of social events throughout the year, and these have really brought the community together. There's normally something involving alcohol, I have to say. There's pims and canapes at one house. There's bluebell walks and cream teas. This one was a clarinet concert in the gardens with a cream tea, sponsored horse rides. And it gets the community together because whatever food is on offer, the community makes. Everybody gets baking. The BWAG membership, we started a scheme in 2006 mainly because when we were going to funders, the main thing that they were asking was how could we demonstrate that our project was needed and that our community supported the project. So we thought we'd start a membership scheme and see how many people would sign up and support us. So to date we've got about 400 members. We've also introduced a scheme whereby there's a corporate membership for a little bit more, and there's also life members that can join. And to date, we've raised about £150,000–160,000 through membership and external funding. We hold a series of landowner events. This particular one was led by Kent Wildlife Trust. You've got John Bennett, the CEO of Kent Wildlife Trust, and our MP Hugh Robertson. They're always, very supportive and come along to events whenever they can. So now our present, where we are now. We're now on our second woodland management plan, and we've obviously moved away from all the clearing of the rubbish and all the nasty elements, and we're now looking at the promotion of the woods, and we're also doing a lot more about habitat management. Conserving Bredhurst woods for people, trees and wildlife. This is our saying, and it goes on the website, on our Facebook page, and it just sums up really what we're all about now. The new management plan, it sets out all our achievements to date and obviously gives us guidance for the next 5 years. Obviously it includes a lot of coppicing, it's a large part of our work. And we're also very fortunate now that of the 10 BWAG trustees, we have a Doctor of Forestry and an Arboriculture, Kevin Whiteman. She's with me today. Give us a wave. So she's a board member. We've also got an ex-Forestry Commission manager and a professional forester. So we've moved from our 6 little residents to people who now know what they're talking about and can really guide us. From the wood we have a range of products to sell. We attend farmers markets, do lots of survey work. And to be honest, when BWAG started, we had no idea about survey work. We only wanted to get the rubbish from the woods, and this is just, really developed now. In 2012, we did an orchid survey in this area of chalk grassland. some of the orchids that were identified. In addition to this, we've got bird's nest orchid, lady orchid and fly orchid in other parts of the wood. In one field we counted just under 25,000 orchids. We actually got up to 32,000, but the Kent and Medway Biodiversity Unit, they chopped some off because they said we might have double counted some of the orchids, so it brought it down to 25,000. We were still quite proud of that. Hold monthly task days, and again we always provide lunch, which encourages workers to turn up. And this slide here, managing your woodland for wildlife, obviously that's what we're about now, but it's always remembering the people aspect. So we're, you know, it's making the paths and getting the people into the woodland. We've installed way markers and benches, and we've also had lottery money to do lots of leaflets. In the centre of the leaflet is, I'm really not doing anything here. In the centre of the leaflet there is a map with all the way markers that are numbered, because obviously the whole area is 600 acres, and you need to give people some confidence when they go venturing that they're actually going to get out again. We have had phone calls in desperation saying, where are we? We're now in the process of actually buying some of these plots of wood, and this year we've actually purchased 4 plots now. So that's all the good news. Unfortunately, in 2012, this was actually dumped, and these comments here were what were on our Facebook. This was actually dumped on a plot of land by a landowner. He had taken delivery of this. It was all old sofas. They'd stripped the sofas for the metal inside, for scrap metal, and this was what was left. We obviously contacted the Environment Agency, but before anybody could do it, he set fire to it. So as you can imagine, there was the fire brigade and everybody else, and that case is sort of ongoing. Lastly, the last thing that we hit the news about was in June this year. Now, this area, it's about 3/4 of an acre. Through the valley that runs adjacent to the woodland, we've got the huge electricity pylons. Periodically, National Grid come in, and they always have done. They trim back the trees. We understand that everything's got to be trimmed back to keep the power lines clear. But this year, they decided to flatten the whole area. It's the most prolific site within the wood for breeding birds. Last year we had garden warbler, chiff-chaff, nuthatch, really, and we do reptile surveys throughout the area, and this happened in a matter of a couple of days. The police were called. I have to say it took them 5 days to get out to the scene. There is an ongoing police investigation, but I don't hold up really very much hope. The contractors did do an internal investigation, but they have given no hint of an apology or any wrongdoings. They said that they monitored the site throughout, but when the police turned up 5 days later, we found remnants of nests, birds, a decapitated adder, so they, you know, it just wasn't done very successfully. They're monitoring beforehand. They did offer us £1,000 in July to bring the situation to a speedy conclusion. I've turned it down with the backing of the other trustees, because we have said to National Grid, this is not about money, this is no longer about Bredhurst. Since this went on Facebook, it got 3,000 hits in a week, and I've had emails from South West, from all over the country, saying this is what National Grid do across the country. So I've said, I really don't want your £1,000, but what we do want is somehow that you change your working practices, because this was just devastating. This was the poor adder. They told me this was a dog attack. I said, I've walked the area for 30 years and I've never seen a dog, an adder or a dog sliced in half. This is the woods now. You'd be hard pressed to find a crisp packet in most of the areas. There's the bluebells. The future for BWAG. Land purchase, obviously, we want to make it a true community woodland, more coppicing, continue with the wildlife surveys. This is the last event of 2013, is our carol concert, and we have mulled wine and event at one of the houses in the village. And we're in our third year of doing a promotional fundraising calendar, which we have on sale today, £5, in the adjacent room. And very finally, I think, Bredhurst Woodland Action Group was started in 2005 by 6 residents who were just fed up with the amount of fly tipping and the off-road vehicles that we use in the area. It was actually classed as a commercial fly tipping site. You wouldn't be able to walk a couple of metres without seeing tyres and builders' rubble and burnt out cars. It was horrible. Yeah, we did our first fly tipping clearance day in 2006. We had about 60 volunteers, tractors and trailers, and we cleared out 100 tonnes of rubbish on that first day. One of the things we found was an Abbey National ATM. We had the help of the Royal Engineers. They came in for in total about 4 months, and they've restored about 3 miles of paths for us. So Bredhurst Woodland Action Group, we raised the funds for all the stones and the material, and they came in and gave their manpower and machinery all free of charge.
Well, this is a beautiful area, and it's an amenity as far as the village is concerned. Most of us have got dogs at some time or other, and to be able to walk in 300 acres and be dry in the wet and just enjoy the sunshine is really good, and not to be lost because of vandalism or rubbish or whatever. And it really was in a very, very bad state. 40 years of damage by all sorts of people. Well, the hope for the future is to buy all of it, if we possibly can, at one time or another, and eventually own all of this woodland, so that BWAG as a charity owns the complete area, and that protects it for the future.
We're pretty close to some major urban areas, and this wood should be used. It should be enjoyed by a lot of people. So we are doing work to make the paths better, to make the paths safe by cutting trees down along the paths. And coppicing. I mean, firewood is a good thing.
And yeah, it's a nice thing to do. It's the third Sunday of every month, and no matter what weather it is, we all come, we all have a laugh, and we all get along well.
I think today the world is such a rushed place, and I think it's readily known that people should come into the woodland or anywhere where there's trees and wildlife and just feel it, experience it and be part of that, and not enough of that happens. For me, when I come into the woodland area, it's a big breath of, hello, this is life, this is where it's really happened, and it's just nice to escape away from that crazy, crazy life out there.